One of the things that these esoteric sciences carry is a lot of personal awakening, a lot of awakening of powerful capacities, capacities of influence, capacities of clarity. Mm-hmm. And that's why we participate in them. And then you have the equal obligation as you are participating in them of what Tiaga Prem is saying, and that is you have an equal obligation to compassion, because you can become so convincing and powerful and influential that you become tempted to achieve something a shorter way than the compassionate way, by overriding rules of behavior, let's put it that way. And it can happen on a small scale, and it can happen on a large scale. And so what we want to communicate in this podcast, in being Kundalini Without the Cult, is to understand, first of all, what is Kundalini, and next, what is a cult? And you know, cults are not all bad things, but oftentimes they are. They all have some kind of a seed of integrity inside of them, but they also can get very lost and misused and abused. And so we're going to go through a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different pathways, so to speak, in talking about the overall science of Kundalini. And within each one of the episodes in which we're talking about a specific aspect of the science, we'll also bring in how that particular aspect of the science can be misused, how it can be abused, and really what to watch out for when you are participating, not just in Kundalini, but participating in any of the esoteric sciences, even some of the more traditional sciences, how to be very, very conscious of, okay, where is this conversation heading, and how much of this conversation am I aware of in my intelligence and in my integrity and in my intuition. So we're going to try to pull off the cover and create the birth of a spiritual planet. Yeah.
So we're going to begin with a basic foundational concept, and that is yoga. And yoga is a big word. It's used in many ways. It's used to describe different practices and states of being. And from my experience with the word, I think about that word as like joining with reality. I like that word. And when I use the or term or definition, when I use the word reality, I'm talking about a big R reality. And that means like what's really going on in this world, or we'll just say on this planet for now. I know there's more life than just this planet, but we'll start there. And that reality is that
we'll start most simply.
We'll start with this planet most simply. But that reality is like, you get caught up in your thinking about your problems and your likes and your dislikes, and really get like stuck in your head. and everybody can relate to that. Like that seems like that's ultimately real. And then you'll have some kind of experience that wakes you up to like there's more to life than that. And those things are relatively real. Like it's important to, address your mental health and how you're feeling that day, and try and be a kind person and all of that. And there's way more happening in reality. And it's even just like being aware of like what you do for a living is not your job. It's that you breathe. And if you learn to breathe well, then you'll live well. I mean, that's an idea of a big R reality versus a little R reality.
And that's
And
also, if you think about it,
mhm,
that's also a big Y yoga.
yeah, that's right.
It's a big Y yoga meets a big R reality. What you just
Mhm.
said there.
Yeah, I like that. And so then the I guess you could say that the little Y yoga are could be like the techniques that you do
Hmm.
to experience the big Y yoga. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it's like we do all this stuff. Like we get up in the morning and we attune to our breath and we move our bodies and we say our prayers and whatever it is that you do, like clear out the sinuses or go to the bathroom or watch the sun come up, or all these like things that you would be a part of a yoga practice. Like the reason you're doing them is not because like somebody told you to, and it might be at first when you're new, but after a while you start to get the experience of like why you do it, and that's generally why it is. It just like brings you more in touch with what's going on, more in touch with nature, the
More
elements, your breath, your connection to your inner guide, your connection to something that makes life seem fuller than if you just woke up and started worrying, something like
so
that.
so what we're weaving together for all of those of you listening and watching is exactly what yoga in the essence of the Sanskrit word means. And what Tiaga Prem is saying there, watching the sun come up, getting in touch with your breathing, doing your washings, your doshas, whatever it's brush your teeth, empty your waste matter, etc. And all of those things, but doing it consciously and doing it intentionally. This is that yoga, and as Tiaga Prem said, you may start doing it because somebody has told you to do it or somebody has instructed you to do it. But eventually you are doing this yogic process, or this connecting with your immediacy, right? The things that are around you, whether it's your toilet, your bed, or your yoga mat, or your breakfast, or whatever those things are. You live your life yogically. You live your life connected to what it is you're doing, rather than just sort of bouncing through life in a disconnected format. And so what Tiaga Prem is having us do in this initial episode is, let's get in touch with why some of these things that may be causing, television documentaries or events in your life between you and other people, just things that are sort of taking you out of the focus on what it is that you're trying to achieve and starts to create disturbances in your world. If you come back to the basic big Y yoga, big R reality, and realize that you want to bring these things together and make them coordinate and cooperate, then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're doing what every student that has ever gone to a yoga class or ever got involved with a yoga studio or ever gotten involved with any of this aspirational effort, whether it's, astrology or the tarot or qigong or tai chi or martial arts or yoga, whatever it is. The reason that one gets into it in the first place is to make things better in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. To be more present to something that is always there. It's just like, how are you paying attention, essentially? Right.
Yeah.
There's like there's always, an opportunity to say thank you for this breath, or thank you for this clean water that I have, or whatever it is, these simple things that we often take for granted. And the practice of, like, the yoga techniques is to choose those opportunities more frequently, to be present to what is. That's
And
sort of how
that's
I see it.
the important emphasis on the word that you're using, and that's the word choose. To actually make a conscious decision rather than just a reaction to some event. You're
Yeah.
thirsty, so you grab water and you chug it down quickly so that you can get on to what you're trying to do. What we're talking about in a yogic sense is that you actually stop. You gratefully fill up your container of water, and you enthusiastically drink and tune into the fact that 70% of your body is water, and that you're replenishing the supply with good fresh liquid. And that's that yogic way of taking a drink of water.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
oftentimes what happens is that people are so enthusiastic about their participation, because once you start doing these things, they make a difference in your life that is, you feel it. It's visceral. And you notice that there are other aspects of your life that begin to improve because you're more consciously eating, you're more consciously choosing what you are going to eat, you're more conscious of how much liquid you take in, you're more conscious of being healthy, all of which is in that realm. And because you're also becoming much more intentional, you're becoming much more innocent. And it's that innocence that, and this is jumping forward, but this is just a sneak preview of some things that we're going to cover in the future. But that innocence can be taken advantage of by anyone who is less than 100% scrupulous. You've got to have integrity. You've got to have, if you're gonna be leading anything with people that are very open, vulnerable, and innocent, because they're doing things very intentionally and very consciously, you have to basically take the Hippocratic Oath, the oath that medical doctors take, and that is to cause no harm.
And even to add to your comment on the, being mindful with the glass of water, you're also doing that with your personal glass of water, if you will. Like, you're getting up and really creating a relationship with your body where you, like, really know it. And I think that's something that gets missed. Like, yeah, you have a body and you go to bed and you wake up and you get out of the bed and everything like that. But to, like, really know, like, I often tell students that I teach techniques to, it's like, when you come to this practice, you think like that's an arm and that's a leg and that's a, but then the more you do it, you start, like, understanding, like, really how amazing this body that you live in is. It's like, it's an intricate universe. It's incredible. And you get to steward it and take care of it. It's your, like, small piece of the bigger earth, and you create a relationship with it where you really know it. And that's what, and that's important, I think, too, just to add to the Hippocratic Oath part, is that I think what happens is when somebody goes seeking, like a spiritual seeker who would be drawn to yoga, they think that somebody outside of themselves is going to give them all of the answers, because they want answers. So it's coming from, like, a really pure and honest place. But then, like, what can happen is that you want the answers, so I don't know, you really want to know, I guess. You're asking questions and you really want to know, and you can get caught in a place where you think that, like, somebody knows your body better than you, or somebody knows your dharma better than you, or somebody knows, like, how to be you better than you, and you essentially give yourself away in that.
let's unpack that word dharma. The dharma, your dharma is just your practice of what we've been talking about: drinking water consciously, choosing food in a healthy way rather than just in a taste way, choosing what is good for your body. And as Tiaga Prem was saying, you're the one that actually knows what your body needs if you sit and really listen to what your body is asking for. And so a person that practices that kind of conscientious behavior is practicing their dharma. That's where that word actually comes from.
Yeah, totally. It's like being you to your fullest capacity, like allowing who you are to come through your, physical self, as well as like your creative expression of who you are and why you're here, essentially, you know? And we're getting in touch with that every day through the yoga practice.
Yoga means to unite. And so what we've been talking about here is, uniting yourself with your morning cleansing. Really brush your teeth intentionally. Really brush your teeth conscientiously. Each tooth, and each space in between each tooth, right? And be grateful when you empty your bladder and when you empty your bowels. Be grateful that you're emptying out the waste matter that was required in order to carry the nutritional matter into your body, because they all come together. Oftentimes the waste is just the container in which the nutrient was delivered into your cells. And so being in that state of gratitude is one of the important emotions to participate in a yogic lifestyle. And now I'll go back to the word that Tiaga Prem just used, in a dharmic lifestyle, a lifestyle of a dharma. And one of the things that has happened in Western culture over the last 400 or 500 years is that capital was introduced into the system as a means of exchange, as a medium of exchange. And that worked for 100 years, 150 years, 200 years. But then it became the object of pursuit. And in today's world, we even measure the health of a nation by its GDP, its output in capital, in money. And this is not, it's Bhutan that is the gross happiness figure, right? They look at happiness as being the health of the nation as opposed to the financial aspect. But because so much has been focused on the finances, personal finances, collective finances, national finances, etc., we've lost sight of that true connection, that true yoga, which is, let me connect with each and everything that I do. Let me connect not only in intention, but let me also connect in gratitude. And so one of the things that we're talking about here in this conversation is, how do we sort of reverse some of that? Because when you think about it, Kundalini Without The Cult, that which creates perhaps the most negative cultish behaviors are usually the ones that are around, right, sexual or economic or power, right? Those three pieces, right? And what we want to show you is that there's a way of being involved with yoga, being involved intentionally with your life, being involved with Kundalini and the power of Kundalini without falling prey to all of the temptations of economic temptations, taking advantage of people through power, and taking advantage of people sexually.
It is important to have a basic understanding of what yoga is so that we can explore this concept of Kundalini. So just in summary, we talked about how yoga is this connecting to Dharma. We use the word Dharma. So we'll say like to the real you, to reality, to your place in the natural world, to your place in your own experience of your inner guide or mission or purpose in this life, and how those connect with each other. So you're a part of nature and you are unique. You are a unique expression of nature, and the experience of that could be defined as yoga. Let's talk about Kundalini and how it relates to this experience of yoga.
Kundal means coiled, and lini means nerve. And it refers to a nerve ganglia, and a ganglia, we have them throughout our body, and oftentimes they're connected to particular glands and organs in those areas of our body. And a ganglia is just a gathering of nerves. It's like a coiling of nerves. And Kundalini is this coil of nerves that are, if you take the navel point, the belly button, and the tailbone, and draw a diagonal line between the two, halfway down that diagonal line, really right near the bowl of your pelvis, is the Kundalini, or the coiled set of nerves, the ganglia, at rest. And those nerves are actually feeding into the spinal column, and then their impulses are sent up the spinal column. And so that's the base. We'll get into much deeper throughout our episodes, but that is the base of the Kundalini itself. Kundalini yoga is a yoga just like what we were talking about. It's a connection with particular body postures, particular breath sequences, particular sounds, particular movements. Very similar in nature to Tai Chi and Qigong and Hatha Yoga, and have many of the similarities to a lot of the vast array of physical, either martial arts practices or yogic practices. One of the things about Kundalini Yoga is that it is kind of a fast track, and it gains personal power very, very rapidly. Personal power through being more clear, being more decisive, being more able to determine what is the way in which you want to be acting at a certain moment. And so all of these things give you a significant advantage in many situations. And we are going to go into the advantage without taking advantage in our conversation around the atmospheres of most of the cult associations that have taken place over the last several hundred years, right? Some cults grow up to be adults. Huh? Some cults, like Christianity, started out as a cult. There was a culture of people that cultivated. All those words come together. Cult, culture, cultivate. Islam started as a cult. Judaism started as a cult. Hinduism, a cult. Sikhism is a cult. On and on and on and on. Buddhism is a cult. Everything starts as a cult in a culture that gets cultivated to become a larger event. And when it becomes a very large event, then it gets the notoriety of being recognized as a religion. And, you know, it's interesting because there's so much. We're not here to denigrate the word cult. We're here to elevate the word Kundalini so that Kundalini and the negative version or negative connotation of the term cult don't get coupled together in people's minds because of the nature of the power that comes from the practice. And so Kundalini is that coiled nerve at the base, near the base, as the position that I talked to you about. And by the way, in Chinese martial arts, that area is called the dantian. And so it's been known in many different cultures as that center point of the body, that really that biogravitational center of the body. It's where you can hold yourself and ground yourself from. That's just a brief description at this moment.
Yeah, I've heard also with relationship to Kundalini that word starts getting used around the tantric practices, of which Hatha Yoga is also one. And so when you hear about concepts like chakras or these energetic or more like subtle body parts of your being, they're related to Kundalini. And I think it's sort of interesting that Kundalini is tied to Tantra, because even that word has, these positive and negative connotations. And it's really about understanding that it's about the individual who is connecting with this part of their being and how they choose, to use that word again, to connect. And this is like written through the scriptures through the ages. It's like there's like this stuff comes with a warning, and the warning isn't like whether it's safe or not so much, because you hear people talk about that with Kundalini, but it's more a warning of like, this, you have a responsibility if you're going to explore something like this, to take care. And that brings us back to that Hippocratic oath again. It's like you're going to go deep into this experience of what is, and you have to take care of it. Otherwise, it's going to cause harm. And to me, it's so cool that something that has been going on for thousands of years, like I mentioned to you before, when we were talking about this off air, that the Hippocratic Oath and ahimsa, the heart of the yoga practice, are do no harm. And without that, it won't work. And I mean, I guess there's like a karmic side of it too, is that if you don't take responsibility for it, you will be corrected, by like the great, mother corrector, or whatever language you want to use.
The great corrector.
The great corrector. And we've seen that also time and time again. I mean, I've been a part of different traditions in my journey with this. And you see when somebody loses connection, there's a really great story. I think you'll like this one, about T. Krishnamacharya, who's like the father of, Vinyasa and Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. And he was a very strict teacher when he was young. And I had the opportunity to study with this man from India who spent 33 years learning from him. And some people were only with him for a short time, like Iyengar and Patabi Joyce from Ashtanga Yoga. They were with him in short windows. But this teacher, 33 years with him. And he told me that later on in his life, he told him that yoga is about making connections and it's about family. And the reason he told him that is that he put so much pressure on his son to do the yogic practices that his son didn't speak to him again, even in his later years. And so he wanted everyone to know in his later years that this is about connection and about family and taking care. And that's not as severe as some of the, the fallen gurus who have really caused a lot of harm to others who are not in their family. It's not as severe, but it is still severe because he lost sight of what this was about, and it broke his heart. And I think like we all have that same responsibility to remember that what we're doing with this work is not to hold power over students or to hold power over, or to be like these great yoga stars or whatever it is that people get, like they get caught up in, trying to be the best or trying to be the strongest or trying to have the most money or power or whatever the trip that they're on is, we can get lost in it and forget that this is about a connection from the heart, and to take care. And if you're going to be a teacher of this, or if like you're really going to hold these practices as sacred, then you have a responsibility to take care and do no harm, and to learn from those who lost their way. And I think sometimes when somebody loses their way, we have the tendency to just be like, oh, well, they were a terrible person. And so therefore I'm no longer going to participate in any of this stuff. And I think that we have a responsibility to go a different route. And that is like, yeah, he lost his way. And this practice is sacred to me. It's not about that person is sacred to me, but this practice is sacred to me. And I'm going to hold it as such. And I'm going to do better than they did. And that's how these things survive, you know?
One
And so
thing,
when the teacher says, do better, tell the people to do better and to take care, then, you know, we have a responsibility to do that.
one of the most significant parts of taking care is to think about that word care.
Mm.
It has many angles. You know, it can be personal. It can be where you are careful. It can be where you are carefree. It is also where you can be careless. And you can care for someone. You can be taking care of someone. There are so many different versions of that incredibly exquisite term. And every one of them has to do with what you were saying, connection. One of the most beautiful definitions of Tantra is a woven connection, not just a connection in which it is touching, connecting in some way, but in which it is actually woven together, that there is almost a permanence in the connection, in that Tantra. And the tantric sciences of the different forms of yoga were all about creating a connection of your conscious awareness within yourself, within your body physically, within your body emotionally, within your body mentally, so that you can be really at ease with who you are in all circumstances, in all settings, so that you're connected deeply with yourself, and that when you care about someone else, your connection with yourself enables your care for someone else to be not careless and even not careful, but to be that true sense of caring, that they experience it, you experience it, and it's that love, that transference of that love energy with great respect. And this is why the warning labels, as Tiaga Prem was saying to you, the warning labels of interpretation. When someone is adoring you, it doesn't mean that they are saying to you, do something for me. They are actually caring for that which they see in you, that which they experience and feel in you. That is the base of bhakti yoga, which is also a tantra, in which you are so enamored by someone's being that you want to copy them. You want to follow them. And these are the ways that are extremely subtle for this podcast to be able to influence a new generation, a new generation and a new generational attitude toward what does it mean to be a teacher? What does it mean to follow a teacher? What does it mean to follow the teacher that is within yourself? All of these aspects that were, in the traditional sense, sometimes completely miscued. The idea that you can't do it on your own was a branding attitude of the marketplace, right? Let me capture the marketplace with my brand by telling people that you can't do it on your own. No. If you couldn't do it on your own, the first wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to get started, right? So somebody had to start it on their own. It's just like I always tell people, make words up if they serve you, except in Scrabble, because that's cheating. But but make words up, because every word that we use was made up by someone at some time. There wasn't a dictionary in the sky that said, okay, we're going to put the English dictionary over this country and we're going to put the French dictionary over this country. No, words in every language were made up when a word was needed to be used. And so you have the authority to initiate yourself into your own conscious path. And if you see someone that is doing things that you admire, follow them and question them and learn from them. But if you see someone that is taking advantage of their power or their knowledge, be absolutely certain to not get trapped in following that. This is a beautiful opportunity that we have because, as Tiaga Prem said, there's so many examples of the misuse of power and the misuse of clarity throughout the ages, not just in this day of documentary television, but over the centuries there have been the misuses of all of this power. And now that yoga and spiritual practices are becoming so prevalent, the opportunities for discredit is also becoming more numerous. And what we're doing here in this podcast, and we would welcome your input, and we will give you the opportunity to send your input to an address. But what we would welcome is that, what are some of the things that you would like us to talk about between ourselves? Because between the two of us, we've had close to a century of experience in this world of spiritual awakening and spiritual organization and all of the things that go along with practicing. And so let's open the conversation and get involved in some things that are interesting to all of you.
Gersing, you mentioned sort of like branding or marketing components, and also control, the language of control. And I wanted to share the interesting concept here is like with Kundalini or with Ashtanga, like these are old words that people came from India to the West and needed to share in a way that Western people could understand. And so they used these old words almost like a brand so that a Western mind could be like, I do this, like the same way as they'd be like, I drive a Ford, or I drive a, so they knew kind of like where they fit in the picture. And in some ways that's helpful. And in other ways, it's like this thing that's for sale. And then you add to that like these being a part of this thing, and you must only have one. You hear stuff like this through the years. It's like, you must only have one teacher, because if you don't, then it's like digging a shallow well. And there's all these little ways to control you. And I was mentioning to my partner earlier that I've had some incredible teachers in my life, and the ones that I've held really close to me and that I've been friends with and studied with for many years, like yourself, not one of those like really inspiring people, as you said, if you find someone inspiring, spend time with them. Not one of them ever gave me some kind of like gatekeeper spiel about how you should never explore outside of this. Like, and if anybody ever did that, like if anyone ever was like, you can only do Vipassana from now on, you can no longer explore, like, I would just be like, I am not doing that. And I mean, I grew up around punk rock, and I've got like a question authority kind of an attitude, and I'm sure you can relate. But I advise anyone who's learning with me to be like, if anybody tells you like you can only do this one way, like I'd get out of there. And when you and I met, I spent a lot of time with Sri Dharma Mitra, incredible yogi and practitioner. He's 85 and still an amazing man. And when I met you, you told me right out of the gate, you were like, yeah, you got to keep studying with Dharma, keep doing what you're doing, and we can explore, what I've learned. And it was really open. And I think that's important because you hear stories about people, the teacher, whether it's because they're feeling insecure or they're greedy or whatever it is, they try to hold on to their students. And
Branding.
I'm going back to the Hippocratic Oath here again, where you think like a good doctor isn't trying to gather patients; they're trying to get rid of them
Yeah.
because they don't want any sick people around. And
Right.
that happens in this too, and I would encourage anyone who's doing these practices to notice, like, do you feel like you're in collaboration with the person that you're with, and that they're like have your best interests in mind, or do you feel like you're being held under them? And that's something to, while you're looking at your why, like why you do this practice. And I would encourage everyone to constantly be noticing, like, why is this important to me? To
Mm-hmm.
also notice, like, are you in collaboration with this person who's teaching, or are you feeling controlled or silenced, or are you feeling like you're expected to be something other than who you are? And I would listen to those things, even when someone's telling you not to, especially when someone is telling you not to.
Yeah, between you and I and just the listening, watching public, you've been to India, you've been to many of the great temples. One of the things about the Sikh gurus is that they always consider themselves to be equal to everyone else. There's a saying in Gurmukhi, which is a derivative of Hindi and Sanskrit, is Ape Guru Chela. The guru and the Chela, the student. The student and the guru, Ape, they switch sides. That there is no I am the teacher and you are the student. It is that we are in this circle of the student and the teacher, because we're in this sort of bhakti state, this state of mutual admiration. And it's within that mutual admiration that Tiaga Prem was saying when he and I first met, I was an admirer of his practice with Dharma Mitra. And he was admiring my practice in Kundalini. And so it was a mutual admiration that created this circle between he and I. And that led to the relationship that has continued for, as we say, many years, probably a decade at this point, that has never had that hierarchical, you got to be in that position, and I've got to be able to stay in this position. We are in rotation constantly. I'm learning from him. He's learning from me. We're learning from each other, and we learn from our mistakes as well. And we forgive each other's mistakes. And that's the importance. And that is also back to basic, big R yoga. That is also part of the correlation, is that if you're going to be yoked or yoga or united or connected, whatever term you want to use with it, you also have to be able to, see the flaws and the faults and not be in condemnation mode. You know, you look at the world today, and particularly in the world of politics and religions and economics, et cetera, and national boundaries and all of that, you see people constantly saying, okay, we're right and you're wrong, we're good and you're bad, and all of these differentiations. What we're looking to, and that is also what leads to branding and marketing in the spiritual world. That what Tiaga Prem was just saying, what has attracted he and I to everyone that we've ever followed or been close to, is that there's no exclusivity. There's no, this is the only way attitude. And so what we want to make sure of is that in this conversation that we're having, in the episodes that we will continue to have going forward, that you comprehend the incredible acceptability of how it is that we want to construct the conversation so that everyone feels like they can participate, whether you're participating in your own head or you want to participate by asking questions. However it is that you are participating, that you can feel like you can participate on an equal basis rather than on a basis of looking up to or looking down on that which is around you. That's what we want to make most clear, is that we create safe spaces, we create equal spaces, and we look forward to so much of this conversation of Kundalini without the small c cult, right? There's a big C cult, which is that root of cultivation and culture and all of those things that are going to become much greater, and they're going to grow out of that. You know, cult is almost like it's an adolescent stage, you know, like where things get all goofy and messy. But when a cult is around long enough and becomes that big C cult, then it literally transfers into becoming a lifestyle, you know. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth there where, you know, when you're a beginner at something that's potent and meaningful to you, you're really striving to like do it well and to be validated and to be seen and to be acknowledged. And sometimes in doing that, like you get attached to the dogma or the rules or doing it well. And in doing so, you may miss out on why you're doing it in the first place. And there's all these wonderful teachings throughout time where it's like, you know, in Zen, they said that, you know, the techniques are the finger pointing at the moon, they're not the moon. Or the teaching of the Buddha saying, you know, you take the raft to the river and then you go across with the raft. And when you get to the other side, you put the raft down and you leave it there. You don't carry it with you on your back. And that's the adolescent part. You know, it's like this really means something to me. And so I've got to do it by the book. And in doing so, you lose sight of like, why am I doing this anyways? And those techniques are there to help you. They're there to help reveal the moon. You know, I think I told you.
And get you across the river.
And get you across the river. Or there's this really great story about this great teacher who, when he addresses his students, his cat misbehaves when there's a lot of people there and starts scratching and biting people. And so they put a collar on the cat, and the cat gets tied to a leash on the tree while he teaches. And then after, they can take the leash off the cat and it can be free and nobody gets bit or scratched while he's teaching. Well, some time passes down the lineage and it's the next teacher and the next teacher and the next teacher. And one day the teacher is giving an address, and one of the students comes to her and they say, like, I really love everything that you share. I just have a question about the tradition. How come every time you teach, we have to tie a cat to a tree? And, you know, the point of the story, obviously, is that the issue was with that cat. It's not a tradition. There's no need for it anymore because it's a different cat. And I think that's what happens is we get attached to these things and we stop asking why. And I know you told me before, like you used to get called question Singh because you ask all of these questions. You want to know like why we do this. And to me, like I would encourage anybody who's studying this stuff to ask questions about it, all of it, about the tradition, about what you see in the media, about what people are talking about in social media, and really like ask those questions from your own inner guide and seek those answers. Like you look outside and you try and figure it out, and you do the practices, and you go on your mat, and you hear the whisperings of the gossip around you, and you don't just block it out and pretend that everything's fine. You actually, the yoga, if you're doing it effectively, will allow you to face all of it and navigate it from a place of like, is this a raft across? Is this going to sink me? Is this like the cat with the leash because it's causing harm? Or am I just doing this because somebody told me to? I mean, that's a real big part of the process. And things are going to come up, and things are going to come up that are going to try and knock you off your doing the thing that's helpful. I mean, that happened to me. Like, there was so much going on in my life at some point in my practice where I was just like needed to pull back for a bit and go like, who am I in relationship to all of this? And even that can be healthy. And on the other side of that contrast, for me, what came to the surface and personally was like, actually me doing these practices is far more helpful and is a profound medicine in my life, and it's worth more than anybody else's opinion or what else is happening in the world. And I can still acknowledge the pain that people are going through, and I can also say this is something that's really meaningful for me. It's helped me a lot, and I want to help others. So I'm able to acknowledge the pain of other people in their process and still like stay true to what's working for me. And that's really important during these times where people are like, you only want to talk to somebody who you agree with, and you only want people around who you agree with. And as long as you do it that way, everything will be fine. And from a if we're interested in yoga, which we are because we started this episode talking about yoga, the teachings say that the yogi is the same in praise and blame, and that the yogi sees the a challenge and like a beautiful moment as the same thing. And what's being said there is that you can face it all. It's like this idea that courage like isn't the absence of fear, it's facing fear and knowing like who you are in relationship to that. That's what we're talking about here. So even when stuff is like, I really don't want to go there, hopefully you have a practice and people in your life who can support you so you can face the hard stuff as well as the things that are pleasant, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And as we conclude this episode, what I would really like everyone to entertain inside of their own psyche, inside of their own consciousness, is when you view the story of someone else's life, whether it's a friend of yours or a relative of yours, or maybe some of you don't even know, you just read about it in the media. What you have to understand is that, like the finger in the moon and the raft and the river, their experience with an event in their life is their experience. It is not about the event. It is about their experience within the event. And so when one person has their experience, or when one person creates an experience for a lot of other people to have, and you hear about it, practice the universal yoga of connecting not to the raft, which was the experience of crossing the river. You're on your journey. Relate to the experience of your journey and the rivers that are in your journey, and find the rafts that can get you across the rivers of your journey. And don't stop journeying because somebody else had a mishap in their raft. We have to make sure that we really separate that which is what is called OPO, other people's opinion, and that which is personal. And don't let the other people's opinion make your own personal opportunity more limited because you're adhering to the conclusions that their opinions cause them to draw. And we'll leave it at that. And we look forward to coming together again and again.
Yeah, thanks, Guru Singh. And we'll talk more on these episodes. And if you would like to share some insights or some questions that you might have, or some topics that you'd like us to include in this Kundalini Without the Cult, you can get in touch with us through the 13 Moons. Go to the 13moons.studio, get in touch with us, and leave us a note. You can send me a DM right there on the platform with a question for the Kundalini Without the Cult podcast. And I'll look forward to talking more with Guru Singh on the next episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.